Hey everybody, it's Natalie from Power Moon Tarot with your monthly roundup of July's astrology and also a review of the June astrology as well. And before I start the July astrology breakdown, I will be going through the news stories that we saw here in the month of June. Let me go ahead and make sure the technology is working correctly today. And let's see here. Okay. So, thank you so much for being here today. And I'm going to go ahead and get started. Let me go ahead with the presentation. So, we are going to start off with a little recap of the astrology for the month of June. June was a very, very busy month, and we had quite a few news stories that happened. I'm not going to be able, obviously, to cover them all in this webcast, but I will go through some of them. So, starting with the June astrology review, we started the month of June with Venus in Taurus and Venus making a square to Pluto. Also, at the very beginning of the month, we had Venus in Aries conjunct Chiron. But pretty soon, within the first week of June, we had Venus entering Taurus and squaring Pluto in Aquarius. On June 9th, we had what I called last month the belle of the ball, which was Jupiter entering Cancer, which everyone was really excited about. Now, of course, it was a very mixed bag of excitement because it was squaring Saturn and Neptune in Aries, which we'll talk about. But we definitely did feel the shift of Jupiter moving from Gemini into the sign of Cancer. And later on in the mid-month, we saw the full moon in Sagittarius and the culmination of the Mars in Leo square Uranus. And this, of course, was a very combustible energy that I talked about quite a lot in my forecast in the prior month when I was forecasting June last month. And I talked about how the full moon in Sagittarius was going to be a hot button for immigration, and that it was going to be like with the Mars Uranus square, it was going to be a very tense energy and perhaps explosive energy. And we definitely did see that in the month of June. And we'll talk through what, some of my predictions were for the month of June, and if those predictions actually came to light as we went through the month of June and saw the astrology of June unfold. Now, I will be putting timestamps in the description box below once I'm done with this video. If you just want to skip directly to July, that's totally fine too, but I am going to talk about what happened in the month of June before we get into the astrology of July. So that's why I'm focusing on that. So, and then we saw Mars entering Virgo in the middle of June. We saw the sun entering Cancer. We saw the summer solstice in June. We saw a Sun-Jupiter conjunction. And then we saw a new moon in Cancer on June 25th. And today, actually, June 29th is the culmination of the Mercury in Leo opposite Pluto in Aquarius, the Mercury-Pluto opposition. So we still have a day or two left of June, and we're going to go ahead and touch on some of the news stories that happened in the month of June. So let's go ahead and it's interesting because I have several planets in Cancer. I have Venus in Cancer in the early degrees of Cancer. And I really did feel that shift around June 9th when Jupiter moved into Cancer. It kind of felt like a soft, gentle breeze on my Venus in Cancer. And I have Venus in Cancer in the 10th house. And that week, I was just being very complimentary to everyone. And I wanted to give everyone compliments. It was kind of crazy how many compliments I wanted to give to people that week as Jupiter in Cancer was making a conjunction to my natal Venus as it entered Cancer. And I just wanted to tell people genuine, heartfelt compliments. And I ended up doing that quite a bit at work at my other job. And people are probably like, what's going on with Natalie? Because I was just being very extraordinarily complimentary towards others. And so I was really feeling that beneficial energy of Jupiter in Cancer and wanting to share the good vibes and the good energy. But I could also feel at the time that Jupiter moved into Cancer, like I could feel like it was like the wind was rustling and it was a soft, warm, gentle breeze, but it was also like picking things up in the environment, and things just all of a sudden really started to move quickly. And that was at June 9th when Jupiter entered Cancer. Like all of a sudden the news stories were just firing off one after another after another. And you could just feel the energy of the Mars-Uranus square really picking up. And the atmosphere starting to get really, really charged with that Mars-Uranus square. And hi, Holly. Hi, DG. Hi, Kiki. Hi, welcome. Welcome, my friends. Welcome to the webcast. So glad to have you here. And yeah, how did you guys feel? Did you notice anything around June 9th when, do you guys have planets in Cancer at all? Did you feel that shift? Because I was watching to see if I felt the shift, because like I said, I've got Venus in the very early degrees at like 1 degree of Cancer. And so I thought, okay, when Jupiter goes in, I'm going to see how does this feel. And it really did feel nice. But again, there was that Mars-Uranus square that was happening in the background that was just really, really amping. Like you could feel the energy like really rising and amping up. So I thought that that was quite interesting. And as you can tell from the schedule here, that the Mars in Leo squaring Uranus and Taurus, that happened, that aspect was exact on June 15th. However, it was building all through the very early part of June. So even though it was like an exact square on June 15th, all the way up to June 15th, from the beginning of June until June 15th, you could feel that tension building. You could feel those, I just get chills even talking about it. You could just feel the atmosphere like shaking. And, you know, we had a lot of things that happened in those first 15 days of June. And in my forecast for last month, I mentioned that it could be a very turbulent time. One thing that, and I'll get more into that as we go throughout this webcast about, you know, what I talked about, and in particular, the full moon in Sagittarius on June 11th really is a trigger point for that Mars-Uranus square, which it was. It very much so was in the United States. And one thing I had also mentioned about the Mars-Uranus square is that the last time we had Mars in Taurus squaring, or Mars in Leo squaring Uranus in Taurus, was in June of 2023. And in June of 2023, there were these massive fires in Canada, which was just like causing zombie fires underneath the ground that would randomly reactivate even in the wintertime, and burning up just hectares and hectares of land in Canada. And then all the smoke was basically coming down to the United States and killing our air quality, and also even going all the way across to Europe and creating pollution issues in Europe. Like, I mean, really, really bad stuff with these fires. And I talked about the environmental aspect of the Mars squaring Uranus. And again, this article from the Washington Post is from June 5th, as that Mars-Uranus square was really amping up. And this article says Chicago had the second worst air quality among the world's major cities on Thursday as Canadian wildfire smoke continued to affect the Midwest, Chicago, Detroit, and so the smoke traveled over 5,000 miles to the UK, France, and Germany. And Canada had over 200 active wildfires, with 100 fires classed as out of control, which is the Mars squaring Uranus and that environmental aspect that I talked about. And DG says, I personally felt Jupiter saved the day all month. Oh my gosh. Well, we are definitely going to talk about a Jupiter miracle that happened to someone. When we get to the middle of June, we're going to talk about just a straight miracle that really did help someone. So we will for sure touch on that because it's a big one. So these Canadian fires were going out of control, and they were going out of control the last time in 2023 when Mars was in Leo squaring Uranus and Taurus. So I wanted to bring that up because it is something that I was predicting in my last webcast, and indeed it did happen again. The one thing that I think many of us were pleasantly surprised but also shocked at the same time was the fight between Elon Musk and Donald Trump. And it all blew up around June 5th with Elon Musk posting tweets and Donald Trump posting back, and they're fighting. And it says, this is an article from June 5th from the New York Times that says Trump and Musk attack each other in a remarkable break. So these two, they're just going at it. Okay, and Trump is threatening to cancel Elon's government contracts. Elon is threatening to is saying Trump has something to do with the Epstein files. I mean, they're just going back and forth, blow for blow with these two. And again, this is another Mars-Uranus thing that is happening, but I wanted to show you guys what was happening in Elon Musk's individual chart at the time that this blow up happened with Donald Trump. Okay, and I don't know if you guys remember, but I talked about a Venus Chiron conjunction in Aries that was happening at the beginning of June, where people wanted to be independent and do their own thing. And that was one of the very first things that I mentioned in my forecast for last month. And indeed, we can see on June 5th when Elon Musk had this freak out with Donald Trump, that at the time there was a Venus Chiron conjunction in Aries in his 10th house of reputation. Now, if you're looking at this chart, you're like, okay, what is this chart, Natalie? There's like multiple layers going on here. The inside chart is Elon Musk's chart, okay? And the outside chart is the transit chart for the moment that these two got in the fight, okay? And what ends up happening is we have Venus in the very last degree of a particular sign in Aries and with Chiron. So we're talking about a wounded relationship or a relationship that has reached a crisis point, and it's in his 10th house of reputation. Okay. And so it's a notable relationship. It's a relationship that's very visible, that everyone can see. And it is squaring his ascendant. Now, Elon Musk has his ascendant at 26 degrees Cancer. So his ascendant is squaring the Venus-Chiron conjunction in Aries. And we already know from looking at Elon's chart that he's not a guy that does relationships very well. And I'm not saying if you have Venus in the 12th house that you're bad at relationships or you don't know how to do relationships, but he has a lot of challenges with relationships. And it's not just because Venus is also in his 12th house. He has Saturn there too. He's got the sun rising with Mercury. So that tells me that he thinks that his ideas are the best. and that he is only comfortable with certain ideas and thought processes if he comes up with it. And he thinks that his thought processes and his ideas are literally the best and should apply to everyone. It's coming from his perspective. While his partner, the ruler of his seventh house of partnerships, is in his 12th house, opposing Neptune. And oftentimes, maybe he is very neglectful towards his partners. Maybe he doesn't have time for love. Venus in the 12th house. Maybe he has very superficial relationships. Venus in Gemini in the 12th house, where he likes what he likes for a moment, but then he discards it and he's too busy, and he's often neglectful to his partners. Okay, so we already know that Elon Musk is not really a guy that does relationships particularly well. And then you have a Venus Chiron transit in Aries, and we have like basically people were comparing this fight with Donald Trump to like a basically a relationship breakup between two lovers is almost what they were comparing it to. And Elon Musk came out and said, I can't stand it anymore. This bill is filled with disgusting pork. Okay, when he was talking about the big, beautiful bill or whatever that he didn't like. And I talked about with the Venus, Chiron, and Aries conjunction last month about the need for independence in relationships and wanting to do your own thing. And at the 29th degree, you know, he's really going rogue. And there's a real breakdown of his social standing and damaging of his social capital. And a love story is coming to an end, and it affects his career because it's in the 10th house. Okay. And yeah, so, and I think another thing that's interesting about this freak out that he had is that the moon is in Libra, and it's on his Uranus in Libra right there. And this is the first moon in Libra that we had since Saturn went into Aries. Now, Saturn in Aries for Elon Musk is not going to be an easy thing because it's in his 10th house. It's squaring a lot of planets in Cancer that he has in the first house. Okay. And this is a guy who makes up a lot of excuses for his failures or writes things off as not a failure when there actually are a failure. And yeah, so I think it's a very interesting thing because this moon in Libra was the first moon in Libra that we had since Saturn went into Aries. And actually, Saturn moving into Aries was kind of the trigger, I feel, for him and Trump starting to have problems anyway. Because the problems really started for him with Trump, I mean, at least publicly, around May 30th. And Saturn went into Aries on May 24th. So it's a very interesting thing. And Elon Musk also has the South Node in Leo, which says in his second house of money, which is a tendency to lose all of his money due to pride and ego. We also see Mars in Leo transiting his second house, opposing his natal Mars. And that says, I'm fighting with the king, or I'm fighting with daddy, or I'm fighting with solar figures. Basically, I'm fighting with my daddy, or I'm fighting with solar figures, and I'm going to lose all my money, or I have the potential to lose a lot of my money, South Node in Leo in the second house, because I'm fighting with daddy, or I'm fighting with a solar figure. So, yeah. And Holly says they're both known for dramatic exits. They both need a snack and a nap. Holly, you know what is so funny is I saw this meme online that when those two were fighting that said this is another example why men are too emotional to be leaders. And I was like, oh my God, because Elon Musk is a Cancer and he has the sun and Mercury, his ascendant, all in Cancer. And he's got Saturn in Aries, which is like, you know, the failed leader or the leader who can't lead, squaring all these like very emotional planets in his first house. And I was like, oh my God, that shit is so funny. And I was like, these two need their like little binkies and their little diapers, and they need to go into their own little separate corners. But anyway, I was like, this is too funny. And I think everyone was having a really good time with it. But for him, it was like big trouble. And you can see the Mars opposite his Mars in the eighth house, where, he's heavily leveraged and he's borrowed a lot of money. And, Trump's like, we'll just cancel all your government contracts. So, I mean, there's a danger of that. He's fighting with daddy, right? He's fighting with his solar figures, Mars and Leo. And Kiki So Cute says, what would you say is the best way to learn about these charts and houses? Oh, Lord. Well, what is the best way? I would say the best way is to find a teacher that you can work with that is hosting live classes and is working with their students on a one-on-one level. Either you work with that teacher one-on-one on like a Zoom call, or you work with a teacher one-on-one in Zoom, or you join like an astrology school where you learn, but the classes are live, not the recorded classes, because there's a lot of astrology teachers who record their classes, and some of these teachers they're very good teachers. But if you're coming to astrology brand new to astrology, and I really feel like FaceTime with your astrology teacher as you work on these concepts together, and as you go through these concepts with each other one by one by one, because it's like pieces to a puzzle. You have to learn each piece, right? First, you have to learn what the planets are. Then you have to learn what the signs are. Then you have to learn what the houses are. Then you have to put them all together. Then there's certain rules of interpretation you have to use, right? Depending on who you're learning from. So, I would say definitely if you're going to learn, then don't pay for classes that are like pre-recorded. Actually sit with a teacher who either is doing one-on-one lessons with you, or you're in a small class with other people with a teacher who is guiding in real time. That is the best way to learn. Because you can get a lot. There are some astrologers that are self-taught from various books and things like that, but there's so much material out there now. I don't know if that's possible anymore. I think when there was like less material and less people doing it, and people just weren't getting flooded with more and more and more information, like you could just maybe open a book and learn it on your own. But I would say having a teacher is where you would want to go with that. It's still like a system that needs to be passed down through like verbal sharing. So I hope that was helpful. And and finding a teacher can be hard. It can be hard. Astrology teachers are hit or miss, honestly. They're very hit or miss. So like some are very good at what they're teaching you technically, but their personalities are really challenging to deal with. And some have wonderful personalities, but are not the best at what they're doing, or are not great at teaching. So it's hard to, it can be hard. I'll do what I can on my little channel here in my neck of the woods to help people understand. So we have that going on with Elon Musk. Now, we're going to get more into this energy as we build into the month of June, and how the month of June unfolded, which was very, very tense with that Mars-Uranus square. And, on June 5th, for instance, Mars was at 23 degrees Leo. It was already squaring Uranus at 28 degrees. There was a 5-degree orb. So it was just getting tighter and tighter and tighter, which means that the aspect is gaining more and more and more power as we were going through those beginning days in the month of June. And, some things that we saw starting on June 7th, we saw large scale ICE raids in Los Angeles. We saw mass arrests, violence, protests. And I had a feeling, I was like, oh, wow. I just was like, it's going to be bad. It's going to be like something's going to come to a head. And it did. The National Guard got deployed, Marines got deployed. Like, there was just escalating tensions, and Uranus is the planet associated with rebellion. And I want you guys to really think about that, because we see, like, people really wanting to push back and rebel against what the government was doing. And we see people really starting to kind of fight back. But then you see the threat like coming back even harder. So it was like a very challenging time. Like, we had a senator getting dragged and handcuffed from a news conference. We had a politically motivated assassination in the state of Minnesota. I mean, we saw the president threatening to arrest the governor of California. I mean, we just saw, like, I don't know about you guys, but I just felt, I mean, I was shocked, but I was also not shocked. Like, I don't know how to explain it, really, how I felt. I don't know how you guys felt about June, but my goodness, what a month. And Trump came out and said blocking ICE is a form of rebellion, right? So, which is very, Mars squaring Uranus, right? You have this militia, right? This unsanctioned militia, ICE, trying to forcibly remove people, and then you have people like rebelling against it, is what you have going on. And for the first time in 60 years, the National Guard was deployed against the state's own citizens, for the first time in 60 years by a president. And the last time that we had that happen was on March 20th, 1965, when Lyndon Johnson took the National Guard and deployed them to Selma, Alabama, to protect a civil rights march from Selma to Montgomery. And that's like the only time that we had a president basically request the National Guard without the state actually doing it, or without the governor requesting it first. And I checked that date, March 20th, 1965, and on that date when Lyndon Johnson did that, there was a Mars-Uranus conjunction on that date. There was a Mars-Uranus conjunction in Virgo on that particular day that Lyndon Johnson deployed. And, when we think of Mars, we think of the military. When we think of Uranus, we think of using something in a new way, right? So if we have the federal government deploying the National Guard, when usually that's up to the state to do that, that's using the military in a new way. Now, when Lyndon Johnson did that, it was to protect people marching for civil rights. Now, 60 years later, we have it being done in a different way, in a much more like negative way. But I thought it was interesting with the Mars-Uranus conjunction and this idea of using the military in a new way, or using the military in a way that has never been used before, type of energy. And so we'll talk more about the Mars-Uranus square and everything that happened. But before I go to, and we'll talk about the No Kings protest and, all of that. Before we jump into that, though, I'd really like to talk about the Venus Pluto square. So, as you'll recall, on June 9th, on June 6th, Venus entered Taurus. And then a couple days after Venus went into Taurus, it started squaring Pluto in Aquarius. Now, as soon as that Venus squaring Pluto in Aquarius happened, I mentioned in my forecast, like there could be scandals that come out, cheating scandals, celebrity scandals, cheating scandals, stuff like that come out in the news. And it wasn't like cheating scandals, but there was scandals that came out of a sexual or relationship level kind of scandals that definitely came out. And one of those scandals was on June 8th, right before the Venus Pluto square went exact, was Jared Leto, who, I don't know if you guys, so for those of you who are millennials or Gen X, I'm sure you've heard of Jared Leto. He's the lead singer for 30 Seconds to Mars. He was in a lot of movies. He was in My So-Called Life with Claire Danes back in the 90s. He's done quite a bunch of different movies. If you're younger, you may not have heard of him too much. But he was recently accused of sexual misconduct by 9 different women. And the story on this broke right before the Venus-Pluto square, okay? And I thought, interesting, what is going on with Jared's chart, right? So I pulled his chart and I was like, oh, when you look at this, Jared Leto has Venus in Aquarius at 4 degrees. And right now, that Pluto in Aquarius is coming right over his Venus, okay? He also has his ascendant in the late degrees of Taurus, meaning this Mars-Uranus square is affecting him, along with Pluto in Aquarius making a transit over his natal Venus. And I was like, okay. And, there's been other people in the news that have had Pluto over Aquarius planets that have been coming out, like P. Diddy, like I mentioned last month, who has Mercury in Scorpio in the early degrees, and Pluto in Aquarius is squaring that Mercury in Scorpio, and all his secrets are coming out and, all that stuff. And here we have another case. We've got Pluto in Aquarius going over Jared Leto's Venus in Aquarius, and it's kind of uncovering all these women who are coming forward with claims that he has, sexually abused or harassed or manipulated them. So that is a very interesting thing. Now, I just recently did a video on my channel about Russell Brand and his natal chart and the allegations that he has been facing as well that were triggered as a result of the solar eclipse in Aries that we had. And when I looked at Jared's chart, I was like, okay, Jared, because he has Mars in Aries opposite Pluto in Libra. Just like Russell Brand has that same aspect. And I was like, okay. And again, not everyone that has Mars in Aries opposite Pluto in Libra is a sexual offender. But I was like, okay, he's got the same thing going on here as Russell Brand, and he's having the same transits as Russell Brand. And this story broke right as this Venus-Pluto square was hitting his chart. And, it's so funny with his Mars in the 12th house because Jared Leto used to have a private island called Mars Island, where he would invite young women to meditate with him, and he would call it a spiritual retreat, where he would like aggressively try to sleep with these women that he would invite to this secluded island called Mars Island in Croatia. Very interesting story. And anyway, and he has Mars in the 12th house and inviting people to a private island called Mars Island with Mars in the 12th. I was like, okay, this is just, this is interesting. Um, yeah, Holly says predatory precursor potential. Yeah, very much so, Holly. And I was like, okay, here it is again. We've got another Mars Pluto opposition being triggered, same as Russell Brand. And the story breaks right on this Venus Pluto square. So I was like, okay. There was also a couple of other big stories that came out right on that Venus Pluto square. One story was on June 9th, the day of the exact day that the square was exact. And that was Justin Baldoni's lawsuit against Blake Lively was thrown out. Now, I have a whole video on my channel on the astrology of Blake Lively, which you guys can definitely check out under my celebrity astrology playlist. But basically, Justin Baldoni had sued Blake Lively for $400 million for defamation, extortion, invasion of privacy, and false sexual harassment claims to gain creative control of this movie they were working on together. And basically, on that Venus Pluto square, the judge threw that case out. So, we're going to take a quick look at Justin Baldoni's chart for that. And then I've got one other example on June 10th, the day after that Venus Pluto square. Call Her Daddy podcaster, Alex Cooper. Do you guys know who Alex Cooper is? Who has a podcast, a woman who has a podcast called Call Her Daddy. She had a documentary that came out recently about her life, and she played soccer at this Boston University, and in her documentary, she does publicly accuse her female former soccer coach of sexual harassment. So those allegations also went out on June 10th, right at that Venus Pluto square. So some big, stuff happening there. So Justin Baldoni's chart. Now, Justin has the sun at 4 degrees Aquarius, okay? And right now he is having Pluto in Aquarius on top of his sun. And, he has been in the power struggle, of his life. He's been in this big power struggle with Blake Lively for control over the movie It Ends With Us. And, and it seems like he's really paid the price for that power struggle. And he's got quite a few planets here in the early degrees of Scorpio. He has Pluto, Moon, and Mars all in the very early degrees of Scorpio. And then Venus would have been in his 9th house, opposing all of those planets in Scorpio. And I think he was traveling at the time that the news broke, so that would make sense with the Venus in Taurus in his 9th house. And, it wasn't news probably that he was happy to hear, but maybe on some level it was maybe good to let go or to not always be, because with that Scorpio energy he has there, he probably has an awful hard time letting go of things unless he is directly forced to let go of them. So that's Justin Baldoni's chart, definitely getting activated with the Venus-Pluto square and kind of being overridden, really, in his lawsuit with Blake Lively there. And then we have the chart of Alex Cooper from the podcast Call Her Daddy. And this happened right as her documentary dropped, the Venus-Pluto square, and she was mentioning that her soccer coach from college was sexually harassing her, and that she felt very embarrassed about admitting this because her radio show or her podcast is about empowering women. And, you can see she has Moon in Aquarius at the 29th degree. She was born on a full moon. And her audience with the moon there is women, and that image of the independent woman, right? And at the time that documentary was released, Venus would have been in her 10th house, but Pluto would be in her 7th house there. And in the early part of her seventh house, where her moon also is as well. And we see that Venus opposing her Jupiter in Scorpio, ruling her eighth house. And we see like a very big secret getting revealed. And anyway, I could go on about her chart here too, but I thought that that was interesting that her chart was being activated as well with this Venus Pluto square. And yeah. So, and Holly says that's a traveling pants ironic connection with those two stories. Yeah. Is it? Is it Holly with the Alex Cooper story? And then DG Power Struggles. My sun is at 6 Aquarius and Mars is at 4 degrees. Pluto is grinding. Oh my God, DG. Oh my God. You never forget a Pluto transit. It is, DG is saying she's having her sun in the early degrees of Aquarius and Pluto is on her. You never forget a Pluto transit. It is a once in a lifetime thing. But it can grind you. That is for sure. DG is saying, I will not submit. Okay. And, yeah, so DG too, like I have my moon in Cancer, and while Pluto was in Capricorn, opposing my moon, it was really grinding out my moon. And the thing is that Pluto transits last for a really long time. So we get a long stretch of time to kind of like understand the message and understand what Pluto is trying to bring to us. And yeah, it's definitely not easy. But you're right, it can be very empowering and it can feel like pressure around something is really building up inside you to the point where you have to do something about it. That's how I felt during my Pluto transit. But yeah. Oh, Blake's character went hard for her soccer coach in that movie. Thank you, Holly. Yeah, I didn't know that. That's wild. And you know what, Holly, I have to admit, I didn't watch the movie. It Ends With Us. I didn't watch it. I did that whole thing on Blake Lively and everything that happened, but I didn't watch the movie. Anyway, and then I have a really good Jupiter and Cancer story. Because sometimes when we're doing these astrology forecasts, it can feel like we're just looking at every little piece individually instead of kind of bringing everything together. And I kind of have a story that brings everything together. Okay. And I don't know, I'm sure you guys heard about it. Did you guys hear about on June 12th? This would be right in the height of that Mars Uranus square, right in the middle of, the full moon in Sagittarius, like right in the middle of all of that last month. Did you guys hear about the plane that crashed that was carrying like 240 plus people on it and everyone died except for one person? This story, I was like, whoa. So what you see here is this was on June 12th. Air India flight crashed and it had 242 people on the flight. 241 were killed. One survivor, which is crazy. I mean, if you have an airplane falling from the sky and you get up and walk away from that, that is a wild, wild story. And this is a picture of the guy that survived, okay? And it says here, sole survivor of Air India crash recounts seeing others dying as he escaped. Isn't that crazy? He saw others dying as he escaped from the burning plane. Now, this airplane was getting ready to take off from India and land in London, and full flight. And it took off. It was about 17 seconds in the air. It failed to get acceleration and it crashed into like a hostel or a medical building, I forget, but it crashed into a building below. Everyone perished except for one person. One miraculous survivor was shaken by the trauma but lived. And this is something that I mentioned in my 2025 year ahead forecast as I was talking about Saturn and Aries. Now, for those of you that remember, in December, I gave a big overall forecast for 2025, and I went into great detail on Saturn and Aries. And I talked about plane crashes and the prevalence of plane crashes, particularly around the times that Saturn went retrograde in Aries. Now, we have a retrograde of Saturn and Aries that starts on July 13th, in a couple of weeks, actually. Okay. So we have the Saturn and Aries aspect going on. And I talked about this whole idea of, fuel, and how Aries represents, fuel and the ability to like power up something with energy. But if something doesn't have the energy to power up or fuel, then it's not going to go, right? It's going to crash. And that's what happened to this flight. It was up in the air for 17 seconds. Aries energy, fast, falls quickly. Okay, can't get thrust, can't get power, has no thrust, and instantly crashes to the ground. Okay. And so this is a very interesting, yeah. And DG says this was absolutely a miracle. Yeah, definitely a miracle. Crazy story and total Saturn and Aries moment. Wait till I show you guys the chart. So the chart of the takeoff of this flight. Now, we have the exact time that the plane took off at 1:38 p.m. From the location in India, London bound, okay? And the ascendant of the event is at 5 degrees Libra, okay? Now, right away, you know that if the ascendant of this event is at 5 Libra, you know right away that Saturn is in Aries and it is opposing that ascendant. You also know Neptune is in Aries and is opposing that ascendant, okay? And so, you guys, this one is just, it gets me right in the heart because for all of my Libra risings out there, now, depending on how your chart is and how your chart is going and how your own Mars is doing in your own chart right now, you may or may not be feeling this. I am definitely feeling this as a early Libra rising. So like in my own natal chart, I'm an early Libra rising. And right now, I have Saturn in Aries and Neptune in Aries opposing my ascendant. When I tell you guys, I had the weirdest feeling. I was working out at the gym, and some of the gym routines, I used to be insane in the gym. I used to work out twice a day, run 7 miles a day. I mean, I was like a gym bunny, 1000%. Now I'm in my mid 40s and it's a lot harder. And I keep hitting this wall within myself where I keep feeling like I'm giving it my all, but I have no energy to burn. Okay, and I promise you guys, I'm going to take this back to this plane crash and this Saturn in Aries. Okay, it's like I'm giving it my all and I've got no energy. It's like you're putting coals into the fire, into the stove, and you're trying to light up that stove to give it power. And it won't go, like it's resisting, it won't fire. Or it's firing, but it's just giving off little putt energy. It's not giving anything. Okay. And I can feel it in my body. I definitely feel the Saturn and Aries in my body. Now, keep in mind, if you're a Libra ascendant in the early degrees of Libra, you may be feeling this too. You may be feeling like, oh my God, like I don't have energy in the fucking gas tank. Like I'm hitting a wall within myself and I can't go, right? So when I saw the ascendant of this plane crash opposing the Saturn and Aries, I was like, of course, right? Like there's thrust failure. The engine won't go. It's like you're trying to the engine needs to rev because you're going up, right? But it won't. All right? It won't rev, it won't go, it won't power up, it won't Aries, okay? And that's where the Saturn is saying no to the rev up. Saturn is saying no revving. Okay? Don't ride the gas, all right? And I don't know if you guys have ever had a car that you tried to start before where the starter was going bad on it and you put your key in and you're hitting it. You're trying to get that thing to start, but it's just not going. That is the feeling. And I wonder if that's what was going on that plane. Now, they discovered the black box for the plane, and they did say that it was thrust failure, fuel failure, double engine failure. Like, we cannot go. Saturn and Aries, we cannot go. So to me, that was absolutely crazy when I saw that because I was like, I get where that plane is coming from. It's not going. And then, yeah, and Holly says we had a large car dealer hauler ship catch fire and later sink off. Oh my gosh. Oh, Holly, yes. Yes. I mean, it definitely like you're putting gas into the stove, but it's not giving off any energy. And I think that's what was happening to that plane. Also, with being in a conjunction with Neptune, the miracle aspect, the fact that somebody actually got off that plane and walked off of that plane alive with just minor cuts and bruises is actually that Neptune miracle energy going on there. And but what's really kind of took over the hearts and minds of everyone was that sole survivor of that plane crash was actually a brother, and that he had his brother on the flight with him, but his brother did not survive, but he did. Okay, and if you look at the third house for the chart of this flight, like to represent the brothers that are on that flight or the relatives that are on that flight, you can see the third house is ruled by that Sagittarius Jupiter, and it's ruled by the Jupiter in Cancer conjunction, the ruler of the ninth house of good luck, the Mercury there, which talks about, a very lucky brother that makes it out alive. And that sibling story being in the 10th house of the event, the ruler of the third house in the 10th, is talking about how the story about the brothers and the one brother living and the one brother passing away, and the one lucky brother who actually lived is kind of like taking over the story of the event. Now, on the day, now they talked about the sole survivor and how he went back to his village in India and how his family was like very, very sad. Okay, we see that very lucky Jupiter that everyone's focusing on. Oh, this sole survivor that's so amazing and so wonderful. But you see the moon in Capricorn opposing that Jupiter in Cancer. And so he has to go back to his family and tell them, Mom and Dad, brother is dead, this type of thing, and his family is grieving, right? And you see that moon in Capricorn squaring the Saturn, and that soul survivor is talking about how he feels so guilty for being alive and how he feels so bad and so guilty for being alive. And I thought, whoa. I mean, and that is really where everything in this chart really starts to make sense, because the moon is in the fourth house of family, and it's like, this story of the brother surviving is exalted. Jupiter in Cancer, amazing, right? But then he has to go tell his family, and he feels guilty for the fact that he's alive, moon squaring Saturn. And he is expressed guilt and harrowing survivor's guilt for being the one that actually lived. And he carries this huge emotional burden now. Moon and Capricorn squaring Saturn, this huge emotional burden of being this sole survivor of this flight. And so, yeah, you can really see all the energies of the month kind of come together in this one chart. And I found it fascinating. I could go even further into this chart, but no, we don't have all the time to do that. Now, as we are building in the month of June to that full moon in Sagittarius, we have the Mars Uranus square going exact. Now, there is quite a few things that happen that I can't get into every little thing. But some of the things that happened, I had said this was going to be a hot button for immigration. When I talked about the full moon in Sagittarius and my predictions, I said this is going to be a very hot button. We saw deployment of Marines against the citizens. We saw political assassinations. We saw Israel bombing Iran. We saw Trump having a military parade. We saw no kings protests all over the country. Then we saw Iran come back and bomb Israel. This all happened as this Mars-Uranus square was becoming active and live and intense. And I mean, we could go into any one of these events and talk about it for hours. What I'm going to focus on here, yeah, DG says, poor soul, heavy heart. Yeah, yep. And, you know, people love the fact that there is a survivor from that Air India crash. But I mean, gosh, like, yeah, very, very sad that he had to go home and to his family and to his village and carry that emotional burden with him as he went home. Very, very heavy. Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, and that's really with the Saturn Neptune. Like, it's a miracle, but it's heavy. Okay. It's beautiful and amazing that he made it, but it's also the heaviest thing that he's ever had to deal with in his life, Saturn. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of that energy going on in the month of June where there's something good, but then on the other side, there's also like, you know, very intense testing energy as well. And so we had all this going on, like I mentioned here, and I'm gonna, after all these list of things that were going on, and mind you, not just things happening in the United States, like there were protests in Spain going on. There were protests in other countries. It wasn't just the US. There were other countries that were like popping off against their leaders and, you know, protesting against oppression. I mean, people were just popping off. And you could feel it with that full moon in Sagittarius, that it was with that Mars Uranus square, it was going to pop off. And it did. And what I think is very interesting about No Kings is that Mars was in Leo squaring Uranus. Now, Uranus, like I said, is a rebellion. Uranus is like, I will not bend my knee to you. Mars in Leo, right? Mars in Leo is, I'm the king, right? And Uranus is like, no, you're not. There's no kings here. I won't bend my knee for anyone. Okay, the rebels are coming, right? So we saw that Mars in Leo squaring Uranus and Taurus, and the stubborn refusal of Americans to bend the knee to a king. It's like, we've never bent the knee to a king before. We're not going to do it now or ever. You really felt that energy going on. And the thing about Uranus that we want to remember is that Uranus whips up excitement and generates buzz and gets everyone out of boring, stagnant energy. We had a lot of people protesting that have never protested before. We had, you know, Uranus really stealing the thunder of Mars, and Uranus was in the superior overcoming position for the square, and Uranus was really kind of like stealing the thunder of Mars and being the rebel. And I love this photo from the No Kings protest where we've got, and actually some notable people did get involved for once and actually like put their names and faces. This is Susan Sarandon, the actress. This is Mark Ruffalo. Celebrities got involved. You know, the energy is high. Basically, there is like a hell no, we won't go, you know, rebellion, fuck the king type of energy going on with that Mars Uranus square. And, you know, this is basically the rebels taking all the excitement away from the elites who were trying to manufacture a celebratory environment, but their environment is falling flat while the No Kings protest is going hard or going live. And yeah, collective fervor. Exactly, Holly, right? And then look at this in comparison, right? Look at the No Kings protest. Everyone's on it. And look at what was happening. I love this picture. I love it. Who doesn't love to see a tyrant who is a bored Gemini? You know what I mean? That's a bored Gemini right there. And, you know, I was waiting for something to show me Saturn and Aries. Now, we talked about it with that plane crash, which, you know, I definitely wasn't waiting for that. But I was waiting for something like this. Now, any day of the week, you could say a dull and uninspiring military parade is Saturn and Aries all day, every day of the week. Because Saturn, as much as Saturn is glorious and wonderful and amazing, and I love Saturn, Saturn can also be very boring, very dull, and a good old stick in the mud, okay? And while Uranus is over here electrifying the rebels, we have the masses being electrified here. Over here, we have the elite. Okay, Jupiter in Cancer squaring Saturn and Aries. They're trying to celebrate the homeland, Jupiter in Cancer, but they're having a very dull military parade, okay? And nothing says dull military parade that just isn't hitting right like a Saturn and Aries parade. Oh my God. I was like, finally, I get something that I can sink my teeth into in a Saturn and Aries level. And, you know, just right before Saturn is about to go retrograde in Aries, I really get a great representation of it. I love it. And yeah, Jupiter in Cancer squaring Saturn in Aries. We're trying to celebrate the homeland, but guess what? It's boring, okay? And bored, I put here, bored Geminis are the worst. LOL. That's this picture. And then, you know, some things that people put about the event. They put that it was low energy, that there was lack of a crowd. The crowd lacked enthusiasm, that it was stiff and overproduced, and that the speeches dragged on forever. They also said it was repetitive, it was long and slow moving, processions that were lacking in dynamic variety, and TV coverage fell flat. I was like, yes, Saturn and Cancer squaring, you know, Jupiter and Cancer squaring Saturn and Aries, you know, compare that over here. It's like a completely other energy, right? And I think this is a great representation of astrology and like where people are kind of falling on that side. And I have over here, I have Dumb Parade. And this is the exact time that the parade started, was at 6 p.m. It started a little bit early, but you can see like Mars is in the 10th house. So they're really trying to Mars it up, but it's a Scorpio rising ascendant, but it's squaring Uranus. So the rebels are taking all the energy, and the leader is the sun. The sun is in the 8th house. And I think he looks bored and disappointed because he's not the center of attention. He's in the 8th house and the military is in the 10th house. And I don't think he likes sharing his birthday with the military. I think he thought it would make him look really powerful and cool. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it made the military like the center of attention Mars and Leo in the 10th house, while he was the leader, the sun in Gemini in the 8th house, and no one really cared about him or his birthday. Anyway, I had to laugh at that. So that was really giving me life as I looked at that photo and I saw this photo. I was like, yes, it is delivering me from evil and giving me life. And then the next thing that, now this to me was very sad when I saw this picture. This is another Saturn and Aries moment. Okay, we're getting some really strong Saturn and Aries images, aren't we? Already, with the dull military parade, with the plane taking off and no thrust and not being able to go, and the plane crashes. We're getting the National Guard that was deployed to Los Angeles. There was this photo of our National Guard like sleeping on the ground without any pillows or blankets or anything. And the headline is "Wildly Unprepared and National Guard Troops Seen as Sleeping on Floors in Exclusive Photos." And when the governor of California slammed the deployment of these troops as disrespectful, saying you sent troops to California without fuel, water, or a place to sleep. Okay. And nothing says, disrespectful military deployment like Saturn and Aries. Okay. And that is a disrespectful moment towards the military. Look, you sent them here with nothing. They have nothing. And it was also under a Mars-Uranus square, too. The wildly unprepared part of it is the Mars-Uranus square that was going on at the same time, too. And my whole thing is they probably did this because they wanted California to pay for their food and shelter and living quarters. And if California refused to do that, if the soldiers became angry and cranky due to lack of good conditions and started taking it out on the protesters, either way, the Secretary of Defense doesn't care either way. To them, it's all gravy. Like, they're happy either way. And what you see is, a very disrespectful attitude here towards the military. So there is that with the Saturn and Aries going on, and we are getting some very, very strong Saturn and Aries visuals here and messages of what Saturn and Aries is really looking like. Now, one thing we can't forget is, all these planets that were moving from Gemini into Cancer, the Sun moving into Cancer, Jupiter in Cancer, Mercury in Cancer, they're all squaring Neptune, right? And of course, Saturn is there too. But keep in mind, all these planets were squaring Neptune this month. And if you felt confused, like you were running around with your hair on fire in 20 different directions, and you're like, okay, one day it's this, the next day it's that. I don't know what to believe. I don't know what to think. We have everything square Neptune, basically. And one day we're moving into World War III. The next day, no, we aren't. Okay. One day there's a ceasefire after 12 days of war. Guess what? No, there isn't. One day we find the enriched uranium. Guess what? No, we didn't. Okay. One day we're entering the war. The next day we won't enter the war. Okay. So it's going back and forth. And what you see with the Saturn, Neptune, and Aries is a feeling of dread and anxiety about war, a feeling of dread about going to war. And there's a lot of distrust and skepticism, Saturn, about going to war, Aries energy, okay? Because of the Gulf War and what happened with everything that happened after that, and how everyone was misled and taken into a war that didn't need to be fought. And a lot of people are not good with that. And there's just been a lot of confusion, I feel like, with that Neptune, and a lot of changing of beliefs. And in the United States, there's been several people who who've been known to be like very, very conservative and who hugely align with Trump, who, as a result of this whole World War III stuff, etc., they have completely, they're like breaking with that. So it's very interesting. I feel like with Jupiter squaring Saturn and Neptune, there is like a lot of illusions or personal belief systems that are being changed or being like re-looked at right now. And it's a very confusing time for people. I would say that, like, there's this one, it's interesting on TikTok. There's this one astrologer who, she's kind of loud, but I don't know, whatever. She can do whatever she wants. But she talks about how astrologers talking about Jupiter in Cancer is a good thing is misleading people because it was squaring Saturn and Neptune, and how astrologers who say Jupiter in Cancer is like this amazing thing are like basically talking out their ass. Okay. Well, I don't know if I'd go that far because everybody needs some hope and something to look forward to in this life. But I do agree that with Saturn and Neptune squaring Jupiter in Cancer, it was a very like mixed bag of things going on. Okay. And it wasn't as easy as, wow, Jupiter's in Cancer, everything's going to be great. Like, there are challenges with the Saturn Neptune squaring, and we did run into it. And interestingly, I predicted my own life in in the last lecture I gave on the astrology of June, when I talked about people resisting making big choices because they didn't want to get into debt and they didn't want to carry all that debt. And it was really funny because during the middle of the month of June, my boyfriend was going to buy a new car, and he ended up walking away from it because he didn't like the terms of the debt, or the debt terms. And that was, I talked about people making big choice, trying to make big purchases and walking away because the debt wasn't what they wanted. And then little did I know that I would be like predicting my own life. But let me know if any of you ran into those situations as well, where last month or this month of June, you went to try to make a big purchase or buy something, but you ended up walking away because the interest rate wasn't right or it just didn't work out. And I think you can even take a look at like Elon Musk at his chart again, because here's his chart again. He's got the Sun and Mercury in Cancer in the first house, right? And on June 22nd, as the Sun and Jupiter started crossing his Sun in Cancer, he deployed Robotaxi, which is his driverless car service in Austin, Texas, right? And when he deployed it on June 22nd, right around the time that there was going to be a Sun Jupiter cazimi on top of his Sun in Cancer, which, by the way, would be a great time to like deploy something if you want it to be successful. And when he deployed it, Tesla shares went way up and people were really enthusiastic about the robo taxis. And they were like, yay, this is great, da 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 da. But like a few days after that, those robo taxis started like driving on the wrong side of the road. They started like, going over the speed limit. Like, there were all these problems that came out with these robo taxis. And then all of a sudden the gains that he'd made like started to fall. And that's the Saturn in Aries right there, because it's like, okay, he let this thing out into the world at a very opportune time, but you also have to account for, he has Saturn in Aries in his 10th house. So it's going to be conservative gains. If he's going to make any gains, it's going to be very conservative. It's not going to be some big thing. And around the same time, he also had another rocket explode for the 4th time. Saturn in Aries, a rocket exploding. So another big failure for him. So That's why I'm saying when you're looking at the transits, like, this was a very complicated transit with Jupiter in Cancer squaring Saturn and Neptune in Aries, with Mercury and the Sun joining it at various times during the month. And it was very much like a mixed bag where you could kind of like sort of take advantage of some things, but it would also kind of like come back and sort of bite you in ways, or if you did have gains, they would be like a modest gain, not like a really big gain. So I thought that that was very interesting. And then I wanted to, this is the very end of June, and now I'm going to go into the astrology of July. But before I go into July, I need to talk about the Venus in Taurus that we've had through all of June. And the fact that that Venus in Taurus is like really, really close to Uranus. Okay. And I need to talk about the tacky wedding between Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez. Now, this is all over the news because they went to Venice, Italy to get married, and they tried to basically like rent out the whole city for their nuptials. And people in Venice started like very much protesting their nuptials. And in the background, you can see there's a photo of Jeff Bezos, who is the CEO of Amazon, which basically says if you can afford to like rent Venice for your wedding, you can pay more tax. Okay. And and people in Venice did not disappoint because they were protesting the hell out of this wedding. So God bless the Italians, okay? But everybody, in the news is talking about how tacky this wedding is. And normally you would think, oh, Venus and Taurus, very like luxurious, very caviar, the finest jewels, right? Which, I mean, yeah, these people are wealthy and they have a lot of money, and I'm sure they had a lot of expensive parties that like went over like multiple days. And, but you can't buy class or taste or things like that. And Venus and Taurus was with Uranus, and Uranus is a wild card, right? So people are calling it a tacky wedding or a weird wedding, or they look weird, or the wedding is stupid. And, people are rebelling against the wedding and protesting against the wedding. And so, anyway, I just had to leave you guys with the month of June there, with a vision of these two and their wedding in Venice, and how it kind of went off the rails as far as public opinion goes. And just how, thank you to the people of Italy for protesting these two. So anyway, let's go ahead and move on to the astrology of July. And as we move on to July's astrology, now, so we've covered the month of June and what happened and some of the astrological events, but now we really want to start talking about the upcoming month and what to expect. So last month, I told you guys that the belle of the ball was Jupiter in Cancer. Everyone was focused on Jupiter in Cancer in June. In the month of July, the belle of the ball is definitely going to be Uranus ingressing into Gemini. For the first time in 84 years, we're going to have Uranus ingressing into Gemini. And that's pretty big news. So that is going to be kind of the big focus of the month of July. Now, I also called the month of July the month of retrogrades, because we're going to have Neptune turning retrograde, we're going to have Saturn stationing retrograde, and we're going to have Mercury stationing retrograde in July. So we've got a lot of retrogrades. We've got Uranus moving into Gemini. And then we've got Venus in Gemini for most of the entire month of July as well. We've got a full moon in Capricorn on July 10th, which I'll talk about. We've got Saturn stationing retrograde in Aries on July 13th. We've got the Mercury retrograde starting on July 18th. The Sun enters Leo on July 22nd. Happy birthday, Leos. We've got a Venus-Mars square on July 23rd. Okay. We have the new moon in Leo on July 24th. At the very end of the month, we have Venus moving into Cancer. And at the very end of the month, we have the Sun Mercury Cazimi during the Mercury retrograde. So those are some of the, Holly says they could have had that wedding in his rocket capsule. I know. I just had to mention it because I was like, oh my God. Like, normally you would think Venus in Taurus is like very classy and very like Audrey Hepburn or Grace Kelly, or like very, classy and beautiful, right? And I'm sure that's what Lauren Sanchez was trying to go for. I'm sure that's what they were trying to go for with their wedding. But their wedding is in a conjunction with Uranus. So it comes off as like different or weird or odd or tacky. And, a lot of people are rebelling against it and protesting against their wedding. So, I mean, whatever, right? I just thought it was funny. I was like, this is really funny stuff with their tacky, trashy wedding, which is supposed to be like this very elegant affair, right? So, yeah. Anyway, so we've got that going on. Now, it's funny because I love Venus in the month of July. I really do. Venus is a major player. I talked about Uranus being the belle of the ball, but Venus is really like ushering Uranus into Gemini, because Venus is at 29 degrees Taurus as we finish out the month. Okay, as we finish out the month of June and we move into July, Venus is in the last degrees of Taurus. And so Venus is going to move into Gemini. And then right after Venus moves into Gemini, Uranus is going to join Venus right away. So Uranus into Gemini actually has a very warm welcome from Venus. All right. Venus will already be in Gemini by the time Uranus enters Gemini. They're very close together right now, and in the early part of the month as well. They're very close together. And I kind of like that for Uranus in Gemini. I actually do. Because there's a lot of people that are scared that when Uranus goes into Gemini, that like the grid is going to go down, or like the power system is going to collapse, or, just a lot of stuff, right? There's a lot of fear and stuff going on with that. But I actually feel with Venus in Gemini and Uranus joining Venus in Gemini, that it's a nice entrance for Uranus into Gemini, that Uranus is like, yay, I'm entering Gemini, and there's Venus to greet me and shake my hand and make me feel comfortable. So I actually like that. And Venus is there to introduce me to Gemini and like usher me across the threshold here, if you will. And it helps break Uranus in Gemini in a little bit easier than maybe would be expected. So I'm actually hopeful for that. And as I was thinking about, Venus being in Gemini and Uranus joining Venus in Gemini, I was like, okay, what does that bring up for me? And immediately I got this image in my head. I'll show you guys. I got the put a bird on it, okay? And I don't know how many of you have seen this show, Portlandia. It's a great show. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out. It's about these two that live in Portland, and it's a very millennial type of a show, but it's very quirky and hipstery and all this stuff. And it's about living in Portland, and they're like comedy sketches. And there's this episode called Put a Bird on It. And it's where they just take anything that's kind of like plain or not cool and they just like put a bird on it to make it cool. Oh, there's nothing on your hat. Your hat isn't special. Your hat isn't like quirky or fun or different or unusual. Let's put a bird on it. Oh, you have this tote bag and it's like really boring and it's just like a plain tan color and nothing's on it. Put a bird on it. Okay. And I kind of feel like Venus and Gemini with Uranus there is kind of a put a bird on it transit. And here you can see they're kind of acting like dorks or nerds in this picture, which I like for Venus and Gemini. It's like, let's be nerds and dorks together. And they've got this piece of like white stale bread that by itself wouldn't be anything special. But they took a cutout of a bird and they put a bird on it. Okay. So anyway, I love that whole like put a bird on it thing. And when we think about Venus and Gemini with Uranus and Gemini, we can talk about, having like a whimsical design for the hell of it. It could also talk about making things needlessly folksy or artsy in order to sell something, or creating and doing interesting things others wouldn't think to do. Okay. Like how to take something. Oh, my poor baby. What's going on? You all right? You need some water, mama? My dog. I'm sorry, you guys. My dog is coughing. You okay, babe? Yeah. She's giving me a look like, I'm tired of you being online, mommy. Almost, baby, almost, okay? And so anyway, it's like how to take something that has lost its edge or excitement and make it more interesting, which is the Venus and Gemini with the Uranus and Gemini. And this could look like in your own personal life, this could look like you being attracted to something nerdy or quirky that you wouldn't normally be attracted to, okay? Or buying that weird pair of glasses that like don't go with anything in your wardrobe, but they're really quirky and different. And so you're just tired of everything being basic and you want to do something different. And yeah, so and, Venus and Gemini with Uranus and Gemini can also be flirting and talking and kind of like playing around with people with no real commitment or solid outcomes as well. So you got to be kind of aware of flirters, charmers, people coming in. I could also see this as someone like you start talking to someone new and you think that they're like way different than your ex, but you find out, oh no, they're actually kind of like my ex, especially later on in the month when Venus is squaring Mars, like later on down the road in the month. I also feel like with Venus in Gemini with Uranus, that there is going to be a lot of technology upgrades. Like right now, they're redesigning the iPhone 26, I think, and they're trying to put everything onto one screen. And this is where people are doing like technology upgrades to tech equipment that in order for things to like look better, it may not change the functionality of something, but it looks better. And this is where we have to know, like, is the change that I'm doing, is it worth it? Or is it just kind of like making something look better? And yeah, so I feel like Venus is there to help Uranus kind of make that transition across the threshold, to help Uranus kind of hold its hand as it moves into Gemini. But we could see like a lot of, upgrades and a lot of things that look different technology wise, but are still functionally the same, which could be a little bit maybe of a letdown or a little bit annoying. Like, oh, I bought this thing because it said it would be different or whatever, but it looks the same or it looks different, but functionally it's still the same type of thing. So maybe be on the lookout for that. And I wanted to review this slide from my, I wanted to talk about this slide a little bit from my end of the year presentation when I was like predicting out 2025 back in December, because I think it has a good summary. Like on July 7th, Gemini, Uranus goes into Gemini on July 7th. But we're going to have a phase where Uranus is going to retrograde back into Taurus. And on November 7th, we're going to see Uranus go back into the 29th degree of Taurus. But then come April of 2026, Uranus will move forward in Gemini for like the next 7 years. So we still have a teeny little bit more left of Uranus and Taurus, but we're going to get a taste of Uranus and Gemini. We definitely will. And some of the things that I brought up on my yearly up-to-date astrology presentation that I had back in December, I talked about Uranus and Gemini, about random ideas becoming genius. I talked about driving yourself crazy with too many choices and possibilities, Uranus and Gemini. I talked about freedom of expression and freedom of speech and how that is going to become very important with Uranus and Gemini, and how maybe with Uranus and Gemini, there may be no ability to understand the other person or find agreement, but we still have to try. I talked about how Uranus and Gemini may bring experiments that yield enhancements for those with disabilities, and how some people may take Uranus and Gemini as a sign of like having little patience for those who think differently. So I'm giving you like a positive and then like a negative about Uranus and Gemini. Uranus and Gemini is new, innovative ways of working and getting organized, versus a negative would be a lack of deep insight and just having like surface level, flimsy solutions into problems. Okay. So I'd mentioned some of these things before with Uranus and Gemini. And one thing I did notice as I was looking at the news is there is these new glasses that you can buy that double as like to correct your vision, but also double as like a hearing aid. And Ray-Ban is putting out these new eyeglasses where they have like this very discreet design where you can correct your vision and your hearing without having to wear any hearing aids in your ear. And I thought that this was very Uranus and Gemini, like correcting both your vision and your hearing at the same time, like two things at once. And I feel like it's also, Uranus and Gemini is going to be trining Pluto and Aquarius. And I feel like new technologies, now, of course, we need to find ways to make those technologies affordable for people and not just for the elite. But like, how can we make that affordable for people, and how can we find solutions to help people, right? And use this innovative technology or this new technology that we could actually have a pair of glasses that not only corrects your vision, but also your hearing, and does it like very discreetly without having to wear like a clunky hearing aid. That would be very, very cool. And they have come out with that recently. And so I'm talking about here when Uranus moves into Gemini on July 7th, it is free from harmful influences. Unlike Jupiter in Cancer. So when Jupiter moved into Cancer, it was immediately squaring Saturn and Neptune. Immediately. Okay, feeling that tension. Jupiter in Cancer didn't have a particularly warm welcome into Cancer. But I feel Uranus in Gemini does have a warm welcome into Gemini with Venus right there. Do you see how Venus in Gemini is right there to welcome Uranus? And then right as Uranus moves into Gemini, immediately Uranus trines Pluto in Aquarius. Beautiful aspect, okay, as far as technology and innovation and driving change in our society. major cool aspect. And Uranus in Gemini is also making a sextile to the Neptune Saturn conjunction, which is helping that out too. And so finding new ways to deal with old problems, like it's definitely good. I think Uranus moves into Gemini free from harmful influences and is ready to do some good things here. And yeah, so I talked about how um, when I looked at that with the Uranus and Gemini with Venus, I was thinking of that 1984 song by Patti LaBelle called "I've Got a New Attitude." All right, and I was like, yeah, that's good. And something we could think about in our personal lives is where can we make life easier by finding tricky and sneaky workarounds to problems that have been monopolizing our time, and how can we find like cool life tricks to like save time. I also feel like with the Venus Uranus there could be like witty banter, there could be hilarious skits and improv that actually like creates change and revolution, even though it's like making people laugh. We could see the rise of new social networks. And I also wrote with Venus, Uranus, trine Pluto, someone could find out about someone dead or famous being related to you by marriage. Okay, that's a prediction for someone out there that I just got intuitively. So write that down if you happen to find out during the month of July that like actually by marriage you are related to somebody who is very like famous or powerful, or that you didn't know about before, and now all of a sudden this is kind of like some aspect of your family tree or some aspect of a connection, a social connection, is like you're becoming aware of it. So that would be really interesting. And yeah, Holly, yes, she does have a lot of things to manage her issues with her tracheal collapse. And she's actually doing quite well. She's lost 1.5 pounds, and the vet is very happy with her weight loss, and we have to keep going on the weight loss. But she is taking my dog, that is, she is taking a lot of like holistic things as well as certain medicines. And yeah, we do use humidifiers and all kinds of stuff as well too. So we've been trying to manage her tracheal collapse for a while now. So, but she's actually doing okay. She's in a little bit of a bad mood, I feel like today, because she misses her daddy, but he'll be he'll be home soon. But anyway, so she's got mommy for today, but mommy is boring and doesn't give as many treats. So, but anyway, so now we've got, so right away as Uranus goes into Gemini, we've got Uranus trining Pluto in Aquarius. Now, this aspect of Uranus in Gemini trining Pluto in Aquarius is just starting. Okay, it's just beginning. And Uranus in Gemini, Pluto and Aquarius are going to stay, because they're both very slow moving planets, they're going to stay within orb of each other for the next several years, like into 2029, actually, like for a while. And you can already feel like shifts and changes coming. Like there's a lot of companies that are doing like driverless cars, which is very Uranus and Gemini, transportation, getting around, new technology, driverless cars, and all this. But it started, but it hasn't like fully taken off yet. And as we get going with Uranus in Gemini trine Pluto and Aquarius over the next like several years, things are definitely going to accelerate and move even further. I feel like, innovation in transportation. It's already starting. It's going to come even quicker now. I also feel like new cures for diseases and scientific advances are like right around the corner. I feel like we can really, really get there. And the question we can ask ourselves is, in our own lives, where can we be more innovative and get with the times and try new things and challenge ourselves to break out of boring, predictable habits and routines? And one thing that I saw that I thought was really interesting that came out in the month of June leading into, uh, actually, I think this story came out towards the end of June, really leading into the whole Uranus and Gemini, trine Pluto and Aquarius. Um, Basically, when they open up like tombs, old tombs, and there's like a deadly fungus in old tombs, scientists have found a way to take those deadly funguses, and I mean Pluto and Aquarius, right? Deadly, like toxic materials, and take those materials and actually revolutionize them and turn them into like an innovative solution for fighting cancer, especially leukemia, which is amazing. And this story is engineers turn toxic ancient tomb fungus into anti-cancer drug. And yeah, I feel like Pluto and Aquarius, like opening the tombs up of old kings and, finding this buried toxic material, which is very Pluto, and then, using it to our advantage in order to revolutionize it, which is very Aquarius, right? And Uranus and Gemini is just going to increase the speed of these discoveries and the opening of new ideas to try experimenting with new things. And to me, Uranus and Gemini is that energy of, what if we try to do this, right? And what if we try to do that? What if we take this material and try to do this with it, right? What could happen? And what we may end up having is like really exciting, revolutionary energy in science and transportation, which would be fantastic to, witness that. Some of that energy in our lifetime, particularly since we've all been going through a lot of bad times with things, and to have like some good, things going on and some innovation would be great. And then the next thing I want to mention is Neptune turning retrograde. So this is from my year-end presentation about the astrology of 2025, where I highlight the dates of Neptune in 2025. And I say that, Neptune went into Aries on March 30th. It turns retrograde on July 4th. Okay, so Neptune is going to turn retrograde on July 4th. And then, just like Uranus and Gemini is going to move back into Taurus for just a little bit of time, Neptune in Aries is also going to move back into Pisces for just a little bit of time as well. Around October 22nd, we see Neptune shifting back into the 29th degree of Pisces. And then finally, in January of the next year, Neptune is going to fully go into Aries and be there until 2038, a long time. And so we're getting like a taste of Neptune in Aries, and then it goes back, and then it comes back full force, right? And this is a picture of the Neptune retrograde, which starts on July 4th. And as Neptune goes retrograde on July 4th, Neptune is squaring Jupiter. And, at the beginning of July, we're still in a lot of the energy from June. And so we've got the Mercury-Pluto opposition is still kind of there, but it's fading. We've got the square between Jupiter and Neptune going on. We've got Uranus about ready to move into Gemini right as Neptune's about to go retrograde. And I felt like on like a mundane level that this could be like something hidden coming to light, like an announcement about the military or military spending, or a top secret prison program to house military prisoners, with Neptune making that conjunction to Saturn. Top secret, like military prisons or capturing people in top secret prison programs, could definitely be an announcement about that, or something coming to light, with an announcement about military or military spending. Now, on a personal level, with the Neptune retrograde, I wrote personally a vision of what is possible could be questioned or pulled back. Some people are going deeper into illusion, while others are breaking free from illusion and finding ways to express themselves, even with the threats around them. And, with the Jupiter in Cancer, we have beliefs about belonging and togetherness versus the courage to stand on business on your own, with or without support. Okay. And some of the questions I feel people have is, will I have a roof over my head? Can I survive this? How will the future be? And with the Neptune in Aries, I feel like things are happening so fast, you can't stop or catch your breath. And one thing, a lot of times when people talk about Neptune, they talk about like the ocean and the disorientation and the confusion. But in actuality, the planet Neptune has the fastest winds recorded anywhere in our solar system are on Neptune. Winds that are over 1,800 miles per hour are on Neptune. And the winds on Neptune blow in various different directions. I actually, when I heard that, I was like, oh my God, it totally unlocked something for me in my brain with Neptune. Because when you have Aries and you have fire and you have things catching fire very rapidly, but then you have wind, very, very fast wind, like whipping you around, right? That was really what I was feeling with this Neptune and Aries retrograde, these fast winds kind of whipping everyone around and disorienting them, but then also things kind of catching fire at the same time. And I wrote here, Neptune's winds invigorate, but also scatter in new directions. So everything is getting scattered in a new direction. And because it's squaring Jupiter, I feel like people's like philosophies and beliefs are changing. Okay. And to be confused is to be caught in Neptune's winds, rushing in every direction, desperate for stillness that never comes. But even in the storm, there's a strange, luminous beauty, Neptune. Everything is in motion, but nothing moves forward. Okay. We're spinning with no direction. We can lose our internal compass when that happens, which is, it's good that we have Saturn there in a way, because Saturn is that grounding energy. It's like we need Saturn to be there. Otherwise, we could just be all over the place. With Neptune, the ground vanishes and only sensation remains. With Neptune, we can move in opposite direction at immense speeds. Neptune wins, and Neptune winds bring spiritual turbulence, okay? And Neptune has the fastest planetary winds in our solar system. The winds of Neptune are not unlike the storms in our human mind. Outwardly, we can be calm. Inwardly, we can have struggle. Outwardly, we could be in struggle, but inwardly, we could be calm, right? It could be one or the other. And that's what I feel like is kind of going on with this Neptune retrograde. And I have felt this Neptune in Aries for sure, this scattering of energy, this confusion, this kind of like going in every direction, but not really going. anywhere type of energy. So have you felt it too? Have you been feeling this Neptune energy? Neptune is about to go retrograde on July 4th. And when planets go retrograde, the energy of that planet is very, very strong. So it's a good time to think about some of these issues and how they might be affecting you. And then finally, on July 10th, we have a full moon in Capricorn. Now, this full moon is at 18 degrees Capricorn, opposite the sun in Cancer, and it is trining Mars in Virgo. Okay. It's squaring the Chiron in Aries, but it's trining the Mars in Virgo. And I'm calling this full moon in Capricorn no frills, just get it done. Okay. Moon in Capricorn, trine Mars in Virgo. All right. No frills, get it done. And it also made me think with the moon in Capricorn squaring the Chiron in Aries that bad reviews can really haunt a business or a person for a long time. Like if you get a bad review or at work, or if someone you know gets a bad review, or if someone you know gets rejected from an opportunity, or if a business gets a bad review, that can really haunt somebody for a long time. And you can get real stuck on feeling hurt about that. With the moon in Capricorn squaring, Chiron and Aries, like it's like that energy of I'm trying to help, but in doing that, I hurt myself type of energy. But I feel like with this moon in Capricorn trining Mars in Virgo, we can't really get stuck on that. We kind of just need to take what we have and move forward with it. Even if it's not exactly everything we wanted, it's kind of like, let's just get it done and move it forward. And I wrote here that basically, like, I don't know why I kept thinking about Greenpeace. There could be something going on with Greenpeace or other organizations as well, or other business organizations who are trying to provide support and solutions, but feel like they haven't been getting anywhere, or their mission keeps getting sidelined. And so they just try to go forward with what they have. Now, for those of you that are transacting business or doing anything around the full moon in Capricorn, I feel you will be holding someone to a standard, okay? Full moon in Capricorn, like you will be holding them to a standard, and you're not going to let somebody get away with shortchanging you, okay? And this could involve counting every penny to ensure accuracy. All right, moon in Capricorn, trine Mars in Virgo. I will literally count every single penny to make sure that I get everything that I'm owed in this situation, like that type of energy, right? But if you come up and you find that you're lacking, or you find that you feel insulted, right? Moon in Capricorn squaring Chiron and Aries, or you feel like you're in a misunderstanding with the business and you want your money back, or a customer is unhappy with you, or this type of thing, there has to be some type of agreement, I feel like, with the Mars and Virgo to kind of move forward with what's there or what you have. And I feel Mars is helping the full moon in Capricorn overcome challenges, insults, and areas where things have been very painful with no good solutions. It's like Mars in Virgo is saying, you know what, full moon in Capricorn, go ahead and move forward with what you have. Perhaps not everything is salvaged, but with the full moon in Capricorn, we have a practical attitude towards things. We don't get everything that we want, but we get some things that we want. And yeah, we just want to make sure. I feel like with the moon in Capricorn trine Mars in Virgo, it could be a great time for like a routine checkup, for installing an early warning system or an alarm system. It could be a great time to kind of take your car in to get checked, or to have the mechanic look at it. We get somewhere by doing and not going to war over every little thing we want, but putting into action what can actually be done in the situation. So like, if you're like, you know what, I do need to go in and get that repaired or get that looked at, This could be an excellent moon for a repair that you've been wanting to make, especially if it's like a provider that you really trust and you've used in the past. That's like no frills, just get it done kind of an attitude is where that is coming from, I feel. So that's the full moon in Capricorn, and I think that it works well if you work with it, is how I feel about it. The only people where it might not feel the greatest is with the moon in Capricorn squaring the Chiron in Aries, if people are feeling insulted or not taken seriously by someone or feeling like shortchanged. That's where things could get a little testy, I feel. But other than that, I like this moon. I feel like it's a fairly low drama full moon. Thank God. We need like a low drama full moon after the full moon that we had in June. That was a lot of drama. And next, I want to talk about Saturn in Aries and how Saturn is going to be going retrograde in July. So here's a little schedule of Saturn's movement throughout the year. And Saturn is going retrograde on July 13th. Now, Saturn is only at 1 degree Aries right now. Saturn has barely been into Aries for only a couple months. And as of September 1st, Saturn is actually going to move back into Pisces. Just like Uranus is going to move back into Taurus for a little bit later on, just like Neptune's going to move back into Pisces for a little bit. But as we noted in 2026, then again, Saturn will move totally and completely into Aries. But for right now, let's just focus on the retrograde, which is happening on July 13th. Okay, so here we have this Saturn in Aries retrograde. Now, Neptune is already retrograde. You can see Neptune is right next to Saturn, already retrograde earlier in the month. And there we have Saturn in Aries there. Now, one message I got right away is like Saturn in Aries is being kind of impatient and saying, can we just get on with it already? Like Saturn in Aries is already a little impatient with life. Now, Saturn is only at 1 degree Aries, and 0 degrees Aries is a very sensitive degree, and Saturn will be retrograding back over that degree. Okay. And right before Saturn is about to go, right as Saturn is about to go retrograde, 5 days later, Mercury will go retrograde. So we're kind of in and Saturn retrogrades, those time frames are very strong for Saturnian energy. And actually what's interesting about this full moon in Capricorn is that the moon in Capricorn is ruled by that Saturn, which is essentially stationary, as the full moon in Capricorn really sets Saturn up for its retrograde a couple days later. And, a retrograde Saturn in fallen Aries is not the easiest, okay? And this could be where we're feeling cold and disconnected from our life. It could be where our body temperature regulation is off, our sleep cycles are off, we're feeling kind of burned out by things. And sometimes we have to take necessary pauses and coolings on what has been a very overreactive, destructive, season so far, right? Like June was very explosive, and I'm like, we better not be having more of that energy with the Saturn retrograde, okay? We better not be. But we got to pull back our energies sometimes. And sometimes we may find ourselves wanting to reject something before it rejects us, okay? Or we just need a break, we need a pause, or we need a cooling period away from something. And it might be the right time to take that if you need a pause or you need to step away from something this month for a little bit before you get like too burned out by it. As I was like asking for intuitive information about this Saturn retrograde, I was given the song Seven Devils by Florence and the Machine. And that song is about wanting to burn everything down. Okay. And it's religious and biblical in nature, and but there is like a righteous fury and anger towards one's oppressors, okay? And we may see like a righteous fury and anger towards oppressive forces kind of coming up, where somebody kind of like acts on it type thing, okay? And where like a victim kind of becomes like a force to be reckoned with is something that I could see happening with that. Okay. So we'll just keep our eyes out for that Saturn retrograde. And I would say if you're feeling frustrated and burned out, take a couple steps back, with the Saturn retrograde. Like, no need to throw yourself and risk injury. Like, take a break. So big, our first Saturn retrograde in Aries, as we're seeing Saturn in Aries, it's kind of a big moment with the Saturn retrograde because Saturn retrogrades can be really intense. So we'll definitely be watching that. And then to top it off, we do have Mercury retrograding starting July 18th. Okay. And yeah, Holly says grab your partner in do for sure with that Saturn. Oh God, with the Saturn retrograde. And yeah, on July 18th, we've got Mercury retrograde in Leo, which starts off at 15 degrees Leo and then retrogrades back to 4 degrees Leo. And I have here a note that the Mercury retrograde it starts off okay, but it ends kind of rough. Now, the Mercury retrograde is going to take us into almost the middle of August, really. So we'll still be talking about the Mercury retrograde in the August forecast for next month, like later on. But actually, it's not too bad because the Mercury retrograde in Leo starts off making a nice square. Now, this chart here is showing, because Mercury is going to retrograde around 15 degrees Leo. And when it retrogrades on July 18th, it's going to be making a very lovely sextile to the Venus in Gemini. Now, that's good, actually. And that's okay as far as how the retrograde is starting. Now, the way that it's ending in August is a lot more difficult. And I'll talk about that in August. That's for a different day. But the start of it is okay. We start with a nice sextile to Venus in Gemini. And on a personal level, this could be a regeneration of a flirty conversation with someone you thought was not on your radar anymore, or they disappeared. All right, Mercury retrograde, sextile Venus in Gemini. Ooh, a conversation came back out of nowhere. Ooh, how did that happen? Oh my goodness, right? Very curious. The chat is alive again. Also, it could be going to see a play or a movie that tickles your fancy. An opening night of a show that really kicks ass, okay? A record release that drops unexpectedly and does really well. All right, Mercury retrograde in Leo, trine Venus, or sextile Venus in Gemini. Very nice energy. And I wrote down that people who smile more and look like winners tend to have good things happen to them. People that are proud and bombastic, okay, Mercury in Leo, and have a flair for the dramatic, but also socialize well, Venus in Gemini, and are witty and charming, do well with this transit. Like, they really do well with it. And you know who it kind of really reminded me of? It reminded me of Mamdani, the guy that won the New York mayor primary, and was like the first New York Muslim mayor. And I saw a photo and a video of him, and he gives charisma. Now that guy gives charisma, and he is smiling and laughing, and he looks like he's having fun and he's enjoying life. And you could just tell the guy is probably a great conversationalist too, on top of it. So this Mercury retrograde in Leo sextiling Venus in Gemini, it just made me think about how people really open up and talk to people who smile and are friendly and confident and have charisma, and how charisma is kind of this like it factor socially that can really get you ahead in life. And it's this unspoken kind of it factor. And sometimes just people who speak confidently and give confident information are people that you want to listen to more, or come off as like good authority figures type of things. And yeah, with the Mercury in Leo sextiling Venus in Gemini, it's giving charisma. It's giving, I'm having fun. You can't spoil my good time or get me down. I'm confident and I love to meet people and talk, and confidence and flair matter. So, and that can be very attractive. And perhaps for some of you, there is going to be a conversation with someone who fits that energy that kind of gets opened back up again as Mercury goes retrograde. So fill me up on that. So let me know. Follow up with me on that. Freudian slip, right? No, let me live vicariously through you, dear watcher. I would say dear reader, but dear watcher. And but anyway, let me know what happens. Do you meet someone who is flirty and fun and flexible and easy to talk to? Okay, and brings the conversation back around with the Mercury retrograde. Now, when Mercury goes direct in August, it's a much tougher energy. Okay. It's actually much tougher in August with Mercury. So we'll talk about that when we get to that point in August. Okay. And now I just wanted to say happy birthday to the Leos. So happy birthday, Leos, who are having birthdays as of July 22nd. The sun moves into Leo. And I wanted to say that you guys are definitely having Pluto transits. So if you're an early July Leo, meaning you're a Leo who's born from July 22nd to July 31st, then you're already feeling Pluto. Pluto is opposite your sun and is an orb of your sun as we speak right now. And no doubt you've been feeling that Pluto energy activating in your life for my Leo suns. And you may be activating as a primal need to rebel, to throw away things that no longer serve you, to confront people who suck and never speak to them, to get in fights with people who don't respect your sovereignty. All right, my Leos, is this going on with you right now? And my Leos, you may never forget a face. Perhaps you may forget a name, but you never forget a face, for good or ill, and especially for ill. And these days, it seems like everyone wants to challenge you, okay? With Sun and Leo opposite Pluto and Aquarius, good thing you've got your claws out, okay? That's a message. It's a message for Leo, for the Leo birthdays. So that is happy solar return to the Leos. And then moving on to July 23rd. So finally, we've been playing this cat and mouse game all month. Let's look back to July 13th. Do you see how Venus is at 9 degrees of Gemini and Mars is at 14 degrees of Virgo? It's about a 5-degree difference there. Now, mostly the entire month of July, Venus is in Gemini and Mars is in Virgo. Now, these two signs form a natural square to each other. So at some point in the month, Venus was eventually going to catch Mars and square Mars, okay? And actually, since about the middle of the month, Venus has been close enough to create a square with Mars, okay? So the square is actually official and like perfect on July 23rd. It perfects on July 23rd, okay? It's exact on July 23rd, but even since July 13, there is a Venus in Gemini square Mars in Virgo that is happening for over half the month. That is brewing in the background, okay? And Yeah, so we've got the Venus Mars square happening in July. And I think, everyone's going to be talking about, any astrologer who's talking about July is going to be talking about Uranus into Gemini and the retrogrades of, Neptune and Saturn and Mercury. Like, everyone's going to be talking about those issues. I feel like the biggest, like, sleeper kind of issues of, balloons just came across the screen. I don't know why there. I feel like the biggest, like, sleeper aspect that you should know about is the Venus Mars square, which is really going to be active from the middle of the month and onward. Okay, so Venus in Gemini squaring Mars in Virgo. And along with that is the Mars South Node conjunction. Okay, because at the same time that Venus in Gemini is getting closer and closer to squaring Mars in Virgo, you can see Mars is getting closer and closer to the South Node in Virgo. Now, these are two aspects in the month of July that no one should sleep on. No one, okay? With the Venus Mars square and this Mars K2 conjunction, the Mars South Node conjunction. No one should be sleeping on that in July. They're very important aspects. And even though I'm not talking about them till July 23rd, because that's the day that the aspect goes exact, it's building from July 13th and on. So it's operating in the background throughout the whole month. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention that. And actually, the Mars South Node conjunction has been building since July 13th as well. But it is exact on July 23rd. Both the Venus Mars square and the Mars South Node conjunction are both exact on July 23rd. And, what's interesting about this Venus at 20 degrees Gemini, squaring Mars at 20 degrees Virgo with the South Node there, is that the Mars South Node, that is basically reactivating where the eclipse was in March. So we had an eclipse on March 14th at 23 degrees Virgo earlier this year. Now, for those of you that have planets in late degree Virgo, and you really felt this March 14th eclipse that we had earlier this year, I feel that the conjunction of the South Node with the square to Venus, you're really going to feel it. And I don't mean that as a bad thing, but I'm just saying I think you're really going to feel it. Because this configuration of Venus in Gemini squaring Mars in Virgo with the South Node is reactivating that March eclipse point that we had before. Now, Venus is in the superior position in the square, and it's trying to bring love and understanding to a place that can feel dark, unworthy, unnoticed, and underappreciated, okay? Especially with the South Node there. And Venus is trying to open a conversation. Venus is trying to get to know someone. Venus is trying to be curious and ask questions. But Mars in Virgo is being perhaps is maybe shutting down with the South Node there, is maybe kind of shutting down and not wanting the attention, or is shying away from the interaction. Okay. And Venus is trying to bring love and understanding to that place that feels unworthy, unnoticed, and underappreciated, which can happen sometimes with Virgo energy. Venus is trying to help with that. You may see this happening in your own life is that you're trying to clear your schedule so you have time for friends, or you have time for your social relationships, or you have time to date, but it's just not working. You can't clear your schedule, or you're avoiding clearing your schedule because you're telling yourself, I don't have time. But the truth is that you're avoiding it. Or you're trying to get to know someone and talk to someone new, but make a new friend or go out with someone, but schedules are not matching. And there's a last minute changes in plans. Okay. And it's kind of feeling like there's a lack of chemistry or a lack of interest. And there's just kind of keeping everything surface level, right? Because Venus in Gemini wants to connect and flirt and talk and get to know and share information and ask questions and have questions asked back and be in that reciprocal question asking kind of environment. And I feel like the Mars in Virgo is kind of like shutting, with the South Node, is kind of shutting it down or is not allowing for that to happen. There could be procrastination or avoidance or a change in plans at the last minute that reveals a lack of chemistry or perhaps like a feeling of giving up. And it kind of reminded me of this like video where a lot of young women were talking about how they go on dates with people and they realize they're the only one asking the questions, right? And this could apply to a friendship too, or a group of friends, or a group of social people you're trying to get to know, or, you know, friends at work, or this group of people at work, or any type of a social environment where you're trying to talk to people. And people that have bad social anxiety, this Venus in Gemini squaring Mars in Virgo with the South Node may really be like social anxiety coming up. A lot of people get social anxiety. And, you know, if you have somebody who's very awkward and doesn't really know how to interact socially too well, or you feel that way, or somebody's trying to ask questions and get to know you, but you're feeling very awkward about it, or you're trying to ask questions and get to know someone, but they're feeling very awkward about it, you know, there's just like a lot of that going on. And it could be where there's only one person who's like doing anything in the seduction dance, like asking questions and trying to get to know the other person. And it's like, okay, what's going on? And it's like, I'm trying to get to know you, but you're not responding and you're too busy to return my calls, or you're making excuses when really you don't feel it, but you're just saying you're too busy and that you have to work or that you don't have time. Okay. And this could be when people are trying to connect with a group, but it's not working. And you really can't force connection or chemistry. You really can't. Okay. And you don't want to be the only one carrying the conversation, right? Everyone needs to kind of carry the conversation. And, oh, hi, Anahira. Hello, beautiful. Mwah. Thank you for joining. Thank you, thank you. And reporting for duty, astrologer reporting for duty. No, I don't know. Felt like I should do that. A salute to Virgo energy, reporting for duty as the moon is in Virgo today. Anyway, so I feel like this Venus in Gemini squaring the Mars in Virgo could be very bad for forgetting people's names or forgetting important details before a meeting and calling someone else by someone else's name, or like in the heat of passion, like yelling out another person's name. I mean, talk about social faux pas. That could be really, really tough. This could also be somebody making an inappropriate joke that turns off the other person, someone who's talking loudly in public and chewing with their mouth open. Mars in Virgo is going to have a list of things that they don't like and they don't want. But Venus is trying to encourage Mars in Virgo to be more open-minded and give people a chance before writing them off. You know, and this could also be like on a grand international scale. This could be like making war plans in secret. Okay, Mars in Virgo with the South Node in Virgo, making war plans in secret while agreeing to a ceasefire. And saying that you're on someone's side when you're really not. Okay. And Venus in Gemini is like, I'm on your side. Just kidding. No, I'm not. Like that type of energy. And I also feel with this Venus in Gemini squaring this Venus at 20 degrees Gemini, we also need to be on watch for Elon Musk, because Elon Musk has his Venus at 19 degrees Gemini in his own chart. So he's going to be having a Venus return next month. And this Mars K2 conjunction in Virgo is going to be near his Pluto and activating his natal Venus Pluto square. Okay, and this may come out where there's more news that comes out about Elon Musk's affairs or his baby's mamas, or this may come out more things about Stephen Miller and how he stole his wife, or in Elon Musk's chart, Venus rules the fourth house. So things may come out about his family or his relationships with his father or the mother of his children. Venus also rules his 11th house of social media, Twitter, investors and public relations. And it's all squaring Mars in his third house. So there could be, hit piece stories that are financed by his enemies about his private life and about his love relationships or his family. Okay. And, with Venus, he has Venus in Gemini in the 12th house. So there could really be some toxic rumors going on about him and what's going on with his love relationships as well. So keep an eye out for that and keep an eye out for his chart. Okay. And yeah, Holly says, "Ooh, fingers crossed." Yeah. Yeah, so that's an interesting one. That's an aspect there. Definitely not to sleep on. I feel like with the Mars K2 conjunction squaring the Venus in Gemini. That's a big one. And it's kind of active throughout the middle of the month all the way to the end. And we're getting closer to the end here. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the new moon in Leo on July 24th, okay? So we've got the new moon. We talked about the full moon in Capricorn on July 10th, okay, where I called it the no frills, just get it done, full moon in Capricorn. Try not to be insulted, work with what you've got, move forward on things, okay? The new moon in Leo, okay, on July 24th. So the new moon in Leo is with Mercury retrograde, because Mercury's going to be retrograde at the time. The new moon in Leo is making a beautiful sextile to Uranus in Gemini. We love that. It's making a beautiful trine to Saturn and Neptune in Aries. We love that too. It is opposing Pluto, and it is with, like I said, Mercury retrograde. Now, mainly I wrote down this could be playful, fun, acting like a big kid, acting mischievous. And I felt like this Leo new moon was like a too cool for school, rebels with a sexy attitude kind of a vibe. Now, here's some ideas for when I pictured this full moon in Leo, I kind of pictured a little kid, like a boy who's like a little James Dean wannabe kid with spiky hair, who wears a little leather jacket and shades and is running around on the playground and being mischievous, like a little Plutonian kid, like a rebel without a cause, Plutonian child. And I also feel like with the sextile to Uranus, people are not going to be in the mood to deal with authority figures. They're definitely going to be in the mood to do whatever they want and break free from authority figures, I feel, including kids. Kids on this new moon in Leo may be very rambunctious, very mischievous, and very active for those of you that have children. And some ideas I wrote down, like going to Sky Zone and playing laser tag with your nieces and nephews, getting super amped up and going to a rock show and then getting really inspired. These are some ideas for the new moon in Leo. Getting kicked out of a place for going too hard or being too loud, but laughing about it, okay? And I could also see parents trying to bring their kids to church or to some serious event, and the kids directly sabotaging the situation to get out of doing something boring. And then the parents are like, fuck it, let's just go get ice cream instead. And everyone's like, yay! And then they go get ice cream together. That's kind of what I feel about this new moon in Leo. And this new moon in Leo says, how do we keep the energy up? How do we be playful and fun? And with this with the trine to Saturn and Neptune in Aries, I feel like the adults need to have fun too. Like we can't always be serious all the time. And this could be people, going to a pickleball tournament or going to play adults going to play hide and seek in the park. I mean, you just got to do something, right? Get out of the house, do something, have some fun. I also felt like with the trine to Saturn, I wrote Granny as having fun. So there could be, like, for those of you that work with older folks or work in old folks' home, you may notice that even like, the older folks or Granny and Grandpa are even in a playful and mischievous mood and wanting to have fun. And even the older folks are wanting to have fun. And people are playing games and they're needing to lighten the mood up. The sun is opposite Pluto in Aquarius. People are not in the mood for authority or for people telling them what to do. The new moon is sextile Uranus. They're not in the mood for following boring rules or boring times, like cramping their style. And I wrote down, it's cool to give authority the finger. So you may see some people giving authority the finger, in a fun, playful way, it seems like, with the new moon in Leo. Um, Less croquet and more cornhole. I got it. Yeah, yeah. So this new moon in Leo, I feel like it could be like a fun, playful energy. And I really feel it as like, okay, we're gonna go do something serious or whatever, but then halfway through it's like, fuck this, let's go get ice cream or something like that, and even adults need to like be rebellious at times. And if you do have young kids and they're acting up or being rebellious or not wanting to listen, it might be a day where it's just like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's just go with it. Let's just go get them ice cream and go let them run around and play. Like, it's better for them anyway, type of thing. So I kind of feel like that's the new moon in Leo. And it's good, actually. I feel like it's a good energy, as long as you're like having fun and enjoying and you're not getting too caught up in your own self-importance or trying to like rule over others with the rules, because I feel like people are not going to be that happy about that with the new moon in Leo. They're going to want to just like do their own thing. And now for the very end of the month, now we've had Venus in Gemini for most of July, but at the very end of the month, we have Venus entering Cancer and squaring Neptune. Okay, and you can see on the very last day of the month, we've got a couple things happening. We've got a retrograde Mercury about to make a conjunction with the Sun, which is the day of the Sun-Mercury Cazimi on July 31st. We also see Venus is moving into Cancer and is getting kind of close to making a conjunction to Jupiter, which we'll see in the month of August. And we see as Venus is entering Cancer, we see Venus making a square to Saturn, Neptune. And, with Venus in Cancer, we need to soothe ourselves with comfort food, self-care, and our soft, fuzzy blankets, okay? And one message that I got about, Venus and Cancer squaring the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries is, don't leave me hanging here, okay? This can be where we try to stand out or help with something or do something for someone else, or do a favor, but we get left hung out to dry. It's that old saying, no good deed goes unpunished, right? Or the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I don't know if it's that serious, okay? But it is a little bit like, don't leave me hanging here out to dry, okay? And this could be where you get blamed, where somebody gets blamed for a mistake. It may not be you, it may be somebody that you like or care about, and they get blamed for a mistake and nobody defends them, and they're left to face the consequences alone, and you wish you could help, but you can't, or you can help, but then it puts you at odds as well. Okay, this could also be where a friend promises they have your back, but when things get tense, you kind of feel like you're there left on your own. Venus in Cancer is looking for a sign of acceptance and social belonging and is looking for support. But with Saturn, Neptune, and Aries, it's kind of like a cold response. It's like do it yourself or get out of the way kind of a response. And so it may kind of make you doubt yourself, like, okay, why did I go out on a limb for you? Why did I try to make an effort to connect with you if I'm just going to get met with coldness or ignored? Right? So I feel like there could be that type of energy going on with the Venus in Cancer. And even if that situation doesn't play out that way, it could be fear, because Saturn, Neptune can create like a vague fear where it's like in our past, we've had experiences that have caused us to be like rugged individuals and only depend on ourselves. And we don't really want to rely on others because if we do, we don't want to be labeled as needy. And I feel like Venus in Cancer squaring Neptune in Aries and Saturn in Aries is like, hey, I'm not needy. I don't want to be looked at as a needy person. I'm just, I'm trying to open up and be a little bit vulnerable here, but I'm not trying to be needy, or I don't, that type of thing. Or I don't want to be rejected for being soft and having softness about me, or be turned away or ignored, or worse, have my softness like weaponized against me. Okay. So these could be some things that are going on with the Venus in Cancer. And again, anytime we have planets entering those early degrees of Cancer, they're going to be in the conversation with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries. They're definitely just going to be in the conversation. And Venus is trying to teach Saturn about acceptance. And Venus is like, Saturn, let me feed you some soup. Let me like give you this soup. And Saturn is like, no, go away, right? And so Saturn's like, no, I'm good. I'm fine. I'm fine without it. I don't need this soup. But Saturn actually needs it, right? And Venus is trying to help and be there. But sometimes when we're trying to help and be there, it ends up getting us ostracized or feeling alone, like that type of energy. So maybe just be very discerning about going out on a limb. I mean, it's okay to go out on a limb. But if you have an expectation that there's going to be whatever, gift for going out on a limb, for someone, there may not be a gift for that, or like, something at the end of the road for that. Okay. Anyway, so, Venus is trying to find, and again, we can see over here with the Sun Mercury Cazimi happening on that same day. We need to find a personal connection, Sun Mercury. We need to find a personal connection to our courage when everyone else feels afraid or scared, right? And the Sun in Leo with Mercury in Leo retrograde is like, how do I find the personal conviction and the courage within myself when other people are not showing up in the way that I thought they were, or when other people are pulling back or too afraid or too scared? How do I show up with a personal connection to my own courage in order to kind of move forward with what I want and need, even if so-and-so isn't there, right? And so, yeah. And Anna Harris says, oh, I have that mindset a lot. Halfway through something, I just abandon it and go to the beach or something. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Right. And that could definitely be it. Like halfway through something, and it doesn't even have to necessarily involve other people. I love that, Anna, how you say that example. Like it could be just, we're in the middle of something and we just, or like, no, and we stop in the middle of it rather than finishing something that could be like really good for us, right? And I mean, I feel like things will, that Venus is getting really close to making a conjunction to Jupiter. So there is goodness, there is, a willingness to continue on with what we're developing inwardly that is good, regardless of what anybody else around us is doing. I feel like there is development with that. And I do feel like, the Sun Mercury Cazimi is coming from a place of courage and wanting to understand one's personal connection to courage. And yeah, it's a very interesting energy. Like I said, every time we've got a planet going into those early degrees of Cancer, we've got, um, and, keeping in mind that Saturn and Neptune are both retrograde as Venus moves into Cancer, which it may be a little different with the retrogradation, because before, when we had Mercury and Jupiter squaring the Saturn Neptune, they were not Saturn and Neptune were not retrograde at that time. So we've got a little bit different energy here with the retrogradation. But I like where we're at the end of the month with Jupiter, because Jupiter is getting farther away from Saturn and Neptune, and you can start to feel the benefits of the Jupiter and Cancer a little bit more. Particularly Venus is going to come around and really heal it and make it better, I feel too. So anyway, that is kiss the boo-boos and make all the pain and hurt go away, right? Anyway, I am going to go ahead and leave it there, everybody. Thank you for making it this far with me. I know that this was a really, really long forecast, and I promise in the future I am going to be thinking of ways to make things more accessible by not making them really, really long, because I feel like sometimes by making things long, I lose people, and people get overwhelmed with the amount of information. So I definitely want to make things accessible and for everyone to watch. And if you have any thoughts on what I'm doing, or you like this new format that I'm working with, thank you so much for watching. And I hope you all have a beautiful and wonderful evening ahead. Take care. Bless you. Take care, everybody.